Amazing. Hello, everyone in the chat. Hello, Jordan.
Hello.
So yeah, I hope you're all here for the session on the North-South divide and how to survive as a journalist in the North, because that's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour or so. So for those of you who haven't seen Twitter already, Jordan is an extremely gifted young journalist living in the North of England currently in Newcastle. He's worked for a lot of big publications such as Enemy and IGN. He's primarily a gaming writer, and he was an editor of the games section of the Courier, which is Newcastle University's student paper. And I think it's safe to say that he's hoping to challenge a lot of the stigmas around the industry, given that a lot of people think that they have to survive as a journalist. A lot of the time, you have to move in or around London. But obviously, Jordan's had a very successful career so far, and he's been perfectly fine surviving in Newcastle. So yeah, without further ado, Jordan, if you just want to take it away.
Yeah, hello everybody. I hope you can see my screen. Is that working?
It is working.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. First, I want to say thanks whoever wrote that I was extremely gifted in that little Twitter thing, because that mass like blowing smoke at my ass. That was nice. Okay, so I'm Jordan. I'm 25, and I'm a freelance journalist from Newcastle. I've worked with all those places Tom mentioned. I'm a columnist at NME, and I write the daily news for IGN. Wrote one piece this morning and took a little break, but I'll be back tomorrow. Outside of pure journalism, I'm a creative consultant sometimes. I just wear many hats, basically, as you kind of have to do as a freelancer. So this is a talk that I gave, an adapted version of a talk that I gave at my old university, which is this one, How to Survive as a Freelance Journalist. But this is all based around the North-South divide, I guess. So it's got to be like within the scope of Newcastle and stuff like that. Okay, so moving swiftly on. Part one, I wanted to talk about my route into the industry, and how that was, I guess you could say, unusual. I want to preface all of this by saying, I'm white and I'm straight and I'm a man, so I have a lot of inherent privilege, and because of the society we live in, that has made things easier for us. However, I still hope that you can get something from me going from my background and my route into the industry, because I still think it's quite unusual by the standards of your typical modern journalist. So it's called a 2-2 in hole digging. I did get a 2-2 in hole digging because I did archaeology. Okay. I never planned to become a journalist, but here we are, and this is like a little brief on what I've done. These are all the places that I've worked with. My first commission was at Playboy, which is an interesting story. I promise it was nothing untoward or anything. And then, yeah, I mostly write about video games, but I write about music as well, TV, film, just anything pop culture, basically. And it's a different job every day. I've been to loads of events and, been very lucky to travel to all over the world on trips as a freelancer to cover things for sites. I do events, I do op-eds and reporting. So that's like a piece I did for Edge magazine where I spoke to Porter Robinson, writing long form features from home over Skype and stuff. And then that last one there is just to illustrate that it's not all like sunshines and rainbows. Sometimes I have to write like really difficult guides for games. Like that one, I had to find like over 300 of these flowers in a game called Yoshi's Crafted World, which was no fun. But yeah, am I okay to admit people? I keep getting the prompt. Is that all right?
You can do. I mean, we should be admitting them straight away. So
right.
I hope that doesn't distract you too much.
No, I keep saying it. I'm like, oh, should I? Okay, how did I do this? This is kind of my track there, from my old presentation of, I did an archaeology undergrad, then I did the Courier, and then I decided to do an MA in 2017, and then I went full-time freelance in 2018. Sorry, I'm just pulling it back a sec while I talk. I never planned to become a journalist. Nobody I knew was a journalist, and nobody I knew any journalists. I had zero connections to the industry, and in some respects you can't be what you can't see. I come from a working family. My mom's a civil servant, and I went to a state school in Gateshead, and full of those plastic blocks that everybody's probably used to if you've been to a state school that are temporary. You are in no way guaranteed to get into uni. Most people skipped it to pick up a trade, usually based on what their family did. And I wasn't lucky enough to get handouts from my parents. I went So, you know, I was quite lucky to get into higher education. The only reason I could afford halls is because I got like a grant um, off the government for being from like a low income postcode. I took on placements during uni to pay my way through. Without that, I wouldn't have gone to uni because the government's just unreasonable. So I made it, and I studied history and archaeology, with the emphasis being on the archaeology. The reason I did this is because the grades to get onto the course were like lower than just history, and I was, you know, which is good, and I was just interested in archaeology. I loved the digging. There's a picture of us digging somewhere. I'll find it later. The trips, ancient societies, stuff like that. But the job market for archaeology is a little bleak. The theory's a little bureaucratic, and they introduced maths, and I was just like, oh no. So I slid out of there with a 2-2. My dissertation was kind of leading into what I kind of wanted to do, because it was a big study of like the archaeology of piracy, but it was relating that to the real media of piracy and how they're portrayed in games and Pirates of the Caribbean, stuff like that. At uni, I kind of lost and later found my sense of purpose. I made friends, but there's a certain level of alienation that comes from being like the token Geordie at Newcastle University. You know, there's a lot of private school intake, people who I just couldn't really relate to, and not knowing what I want to do around that time. And without any of the backstops, I spiraled into like a bit of a crisis of sorts, which helped us understand myself and my mental health a bit better. You know, anxiety and depression, that sort of stuff. At that dark time, I was asking myself questions like, oh, I don't belong here. What the hell am I going to do? What's going to fulfill me? And during this incredible low point, I sheepishly asked someone I thought who was really cool on Tumblr, one of my mates, Jazz, who was an editor at the student newspaper, if I could go to the weekly meeting, which is really cringy, but also hilarious because anyone can go to the student newspaper meeting. It's not like an exclusive club. I was just that anxious that I felt like I needed permission. What followed turned my uni experience around. You know, as many of you may know, like student newspapers are amazing, and I was the gaming editor, and that was great. I made friends, found a passion, and I used to post pictures of my pages on Facebook every week and annoy everyone on my feed. I fell into it basically, you know. But anyway, moving on. So I got a lot of bad advice when I started trying to become a journalist. There was this false narrative of breaking into journalism. I had a picture painted for us, which was like, you know, leave your hometown, move down to London to do unpaid internships, work ridiculous hours, making coffee for a bunch of people who, you know, are just above you for no reason other than they are, and spiraling into debt to the point where I would, you know, to get a crumb of a byline that I could probably turn into a staff job. It seemed impossible. And even now you get like a lot of this narrative of like guilt about it and oh, that's just what you do. I think this perception pushes out a lot of people who don't have, you know, like the bank of mum and dad to fund their ambitions. Even just moving down south was just totally fiscally ridiculous to me. Yeah, so, you know, that's what I'm trying to, and obviously, like, you know, rent and down south is just ridiculous. The reality of northern journalism is, you know, like the BBC's has a base in Salford now. You know, there's a lot of jobs up north, you know, and a lot of amazing publications in the north of England if you wanted to go and be like a news journalist and stuff like that. I'm a freelancer, but, you know, I'll get onto that point in a sec with like everyone's emails on the internet. The stuffiness that we see is kind of like a smokescreen to push us away and make us think it's kind of impossible. It's not. And, you know, people will say, oh, I just got really lucky. But in a lot of those cases, there might have been a connection or something that like helped them land the job. But, you know, you can't make it if you want, you know, you know, it's not like a miracle where you just graft away, but you need some luck. But still, I think that's worth saying. And obviously people are more into remote opportunities now because of the pandemic. A lot of companies and businesses, especially journalism, has realized that, you know, if you've got Google Docs on your computer or like access to the CMS, you can work from home. And that has probably pushed a lot of people to think, okay, maybe we should hire people regardless of their location. You know, it wasn't easy. I was an archaeology student, and like that interests us, but just because my degree is in one thing didn't mean that I couldn't change and do another. I know a lot of people, when I've done previous talks, have been like, oh, I do like maths or science or something, but I really want to be a journalist. I don't think you should let that stop you, you know. And, you know, journey, it's a difficult thing to get into. It's still dominated by like, you know, the upper class. I don't have connections or anything like that. I had to work quite hard, and find a foothold outside of the London bubble. And I will get on to my tips on how to do all this. I'm not just saying like this is just how I've done it. But yeah, and my mental health, I struggled with my mental health and still managed to, you know, claw my way out and push myself out there. And I must thank Newcastle Uni's mental health therapy services and people at the careers service in Newcastle as well. I would say to everybody, like, engage with your careers service at uni, because they're so useful for this kind of thing. They tell you how to how your trajectory might look in the future and push you towards placements that might help you in your career. At first I was like, oh, why should I go to the career service? Like, you know, I don't know what I want to do. But when I sat down and spoke to somebody about my ambitions, it was super helpful. Oh, sorry, there we go. How to get into freelancing. So this is the, you know, the bit of it. Here's some easy things you can do that'll help you immediately. Make a portfolio using a site called Muckrack. I've put career articles there, you know, because this is an old presentation, but feel free to use anything from your blog, your student portfolio, and you know, flip them on there, and you'll have like a good little portfolio to show people and send people. Sort your LinkedIn out. A lot of people use LinkedIn to find stories just purely because it's like a really good service for that kind of thing. It seems a bit stuffy and businessy, and everybody posts those really like terrible boomer memes about business, but ignore all that and just use it to contact people in interviews. And you can find stories really easily that way. People seem to be like willing to connect with you, and you can talk, and you can make a sheet of editorial contacts where you want a byline, and that can be handy too. If you're good at something, never do it for free. Sorry to quote the Joker, but that's just a good little thing to say. You've all written for a student publication, you've written for a blog or something. You're not aspiring, you're already writers. A lot of people say like, oh, I'm an aspiring writer. Like, no, you know, like, you know, if you've written something, you're a writer. You're more than capable of writing for any high profile outlet. In my experience, a lot of people offer you at the start, you know, work for exposure, which is like this magical currency that doesn't actually exist. I would ignore all that. Try not to do that if you can help it. Like, obviously I did a bit of work for free when I started, and you do fall into these traps a little bit, but it's better to get out of them quickly and move on to the actual freelancing, because it's not as barriered off as you might think. Some sites might do like pay-per-view where you'll get paid based on how well the article does, but I think this incentivizes a type of writing it's not great, and it, you know, and it doesn't, it's like undervaluing your work, I guess. I didn't know any better, and did a good bit of that, and I learned a lot, to be honest. Like, it was really useful, but like, I think I know lots of people who've just skipped that whole part entirely and just started like flat rate freelancing. But yeah, and there's just like a recommendation for the amount of money you should be paid as a really low base rate, but, you know, like, always shoot higher than that. It's just some places don't pay very well. And yeah, you know, the higher you go up in the site, some sites have like massive budgets for features and stuff like that. You've just got to find which one has the budget for what you want to do, and message them, rather than, you know, compromising and giving it to some place that might not make it worth your while. Yeah, there's a jargon buster. So, you know, there's two main things I do is like op-eds. That's like a random op-ed from one of my mates, which is about how Mewtwo is like a 19th century poet. So, you know, you can write about anything you want, really. As long as you can sell it, like, as long as you can prove your thesis in a pitch like he did. And then you get something great like that. And then, you know, reporting and long form features. I recently did an interview with Julian Casablancas for NME about like games and video game design, and his, like, you know, musical interests as well as his games. You know, you'll do a lot of stuff where you're interviewing many people and writing about events and things like that. I like to equate freelancing to, like, if you've written for a student paper, which I imagine a lot of you have, it's like writing for every section of your student paper, but in real life. You know, I've been paid to write a load of mad stuff, like about Courage the Cowardly Dog and Frank Ocean's music being influenced by the PlayStation. And a good one that you should check out, because it's a kind of link to this talk. I did like a piece about trying to survive doing my own job in The Sims, and that was like really insightful. And I think if you're interested in what I'm about to say here, I'd definitely check that out, because I think it talks about a lot of similar things and the ins and outs of freelancing, and me being very real about like what it's like. Your brain on email and social media. Essentially, when you become a freelancer or any sort of journalist, really, your brain becomes like 50% email. you know, as a freelancer, I am the business and my product is the word. So you need to know how to sell yourself. As I said before, you know, most, if not all of outlet emails are public knowledge. They're either in an editor's bio on Twitter on the about page of the website. They're not hidden or secret, and editors do call outs for pitches often. So, you know, follow them. Make friends with your fellow lancers and your writers on Twitter. I've got mates like all over the world now, and I really cherish that. Just by being a freelancer and being involved in the community that I'm in, you know, be social and nice, read each other's work. I think that's really useful. You can easily fall into a pit of like envy, being like, oh, they've wrote something better than me. How could I not do that? Like, don't treat it like that. Like, share it, think about it, you know, congratulate them for getting by in a very difficult, saturated space, you know. And support publications that are like, you know, indie, and help them out so that they can blossom. I think that's really useful, and you'll find like communities there that are great. Yeah, tag your emails with a pitch, follow up after a few days if it's a timely idea. If not, you can just tell the editor that you're taking it elsewhere if it's getting to the point where it might be too relevant and you're running out of time. And don't be precious, because, you know, it's good to love your ideas, but like, they're worth money and you need to sell them. So just be like that. This was my first pitch, so this is just 2016. I pitched Playboy, and it was about Me Tomo, which, I mean, you might not be familiar with, but it was this like social network that was set up by Nintendo that was shut down. This is a horrendous pitch. Like, when I look back at it now, I'm always like, what on earth was I thinking? But somehow it still got accepted. I think the editor took pity on us. Playboy no longer exists, by the way. In terms of the gaming section, I mean, the site still exists, but yeah. So this article I've had to rehost, which is something you have to get used to as a freelancer as well. Sometimes sites will go down and you'll lose your articles. This is a better pitch, where I wrote about like Left 4 Dead and pitched it was 10 years since this game come out, and I pitched an article writing, speaking to like the people who had made it about what they think, and skewed it for relevancy by talking about how the community had kept it alive, and there's all these people who are still playing it, which is amazing. Lots of links in there, you know, potential interview targets. That one landed as well. I've got my clips at the bottom, and just explain myself. I pitched the right outlet and editor for the story. I made it relevant. I told them why I'm the person to write it. I linked to content that supports my thesis. It was fairly succinct. I'm pretty bad at writing like succinct pitches, but I think everybody goes through that at the start. You don't need to be amazing at writing succinct pitches. You can write big, flowery ones if you want. An editor might not be too happy about that, but, you know, try and keep it tight if you can. It had interviews, and interviews are always quite getting access for a pitch is usually a surefire way to get it accepted. You know, if you've got like an interview with a big name or something like that, like, that's always going to land. I think it's easier to land than like an op-ed where you have to really argue that you're the person to write it and your thesis is sound. Word count, headlines, pitch formalities, that kind of stuff. It ain't all sunshines and rainbows. There, you know, there's no upper limit on like a salary. I get paid a lot more than what I would if I took an entry level job. I don't do anything close to like a 9 to 5. I have a decent work-life balance. There's nobody breathing down my neck to tell us to meet a quota or do something on a daily basis beyond my own deadlines, which you have to get used to, obviously, kind of like uni work. Holidays and days off whenever you want, within reason, of course. If I'm committed to do a certain thing for a certain site, I've got to do that and tell them. The bad is you do all your own taxes, which is very scary, but it's not that bad. You can learn how to do that, and you can get an accountant if you want. You sort your own savings and your pension, but like, you know, as I say, it's not like we're going to retire anyway. So yeah. Nobody tells you to stop, which is the other big problem. I work in the evening sometimes and don't work the day, depending on the assignment. You know, it might not fit how you work. Like, sometimes you're working long hours, and it can be difficult to manage your time. And sometimes I'll like work all the time and like have to take a few days off. I'm just like, I'm burnt out. When I was at uni, I used to do my essays the night before like an idiot. So, you know, it might suit you if you're kind of into that. The job security depends on whether you have ideas and can skew for relevancy, and you know, mental labor is real labor. You have to be mindful of that and in good control of your mental health. You know, use the services around you where possible. and you make loads of pals, which is a good thing. You know, I've got pals all over the world, but it can be lonely if there aren't many people local to you. I mean, especially now, you're not seeing anyone now, but like, I don't know many freelance journalists from Newcastle, and don't meet up with, fellows like that. But, yeah, so here's just some very vague, big things that I learned. It's a confidence trick. I'm not a confident person at all. I'm super anxious. It's all about self-belief, and if you don't have that, I guess you've just got to like fake it till you make it, be cheeky and send your pictures. One thing that's like a Geordieism is like shy Ben's getting out, which is something that my parents and relatives used to say to me, which basically just means, you have to like reach out and ask for something if you want it. Yeah, and you've got to do the scary thing. I still get plenty of pictures rejected. My hit rate is not like amazing, do you know what I mean? But I just send a lot of pictures. And this is a good one. Editors don't really care who you are. They care about the strength of your idea. So, like when I started out, I had just my courier bylines in the paper, and my clips from my blog. And I used that if you saw that on my first page, I used that for my freelance bylines and press passes to get into events. Like when I was in uni in my first year, I went to this games industry event called Gamescom and got like a pass through some site that I was working for free and just winged it and like went to this event. And it was really handy. Do you know what I mean? Like if you can leverage your bylines that you already have and don't think that they're not worth anything. But yeah, in my experience, they don't really care whether you've got like a previous byline at an outlet. All they care about is if you have a good idea or not. It took me a really long time to get my head around that. Don't be like me if you can help it. The quicker you get over that hurdle, the better, I think. I'd convince myself like, oh, I'm not good enough yet to pitch to X site. I'll have to keep working away and squirreling away until I feel like I'm good enough. That's not really how it works in my experience. Like at one point I just pitched a really big outlet, I suppose, in my industry, and they accepted it. And I sent it out there thinking like nobody's going to listen to me. Why would they even respond? But it turned out good. So, shoot for the moon, as they say. And yeah, the strength of your idea is a subjective term. Don't think that your ideas aren't worth anything, no matter where you're from or who you are. Like people get in ruts where they convince themselves that, oh, why would anyone listen to me? But like, as I've proven before, like, you can write about pretty much anything in this game. And yeah, somebody once told me, let them say no to you. You don't lose anything by sending the actual pitch. And if they say no to you, it sucks, but it's better than having not sent it. Okay. Oh yeah, this one's good. Editorial is like a back and forth process and you need to be open to it. I find this one to be extremely important as a journalist. You have to be able to handle rejection and constructive editorial criticism. You'll get used to it if you want to be a journalist and you're committing to it. But editors, their job is to like tear your work apart and make it the best it can be. And the best thing to do is like embrace that. I know it feels quite scary at first, and it's like it feels like a personal attack if someone's like going into your article and being like, "Oh, we need to cut this bit, change this, and all that." But don't worry about that. I tried to do this when I was a gaming editor at the Courier, and everyone, like, I tried it for like a few months to be like, okay, this is what journalism really is. You need to get used to this. Like, I wasn't being like a meanie or anything. I was just like being very careful and polite and being like, oh, if we change this, and tried to introduce them to the editorial, and I was like deemed Satan. But it's going to be a very important part of your life, and you'll learn soon enough if you be a journalist that's what happens. Yeah, in the outside world, you don't just like give your article to the editor and forget about it. They will have questions. Sometimes they just put it up and that's fine, but that's not always how it works. I made a documentary about the Courier, actually, if you want to see if you like the idea of like cool student journalism stuff, and you can go watch that on YouTube if you like. It's got the old office in it, which is scary. Yeah, that's me. So question time, please follow me on Twitter if you're interested in hearing what I've got to say, but I will warn you, it's just like shit posts. And you can DM me any questions if you want, and I'll answer them. And if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, just let me know and I'll send it to you. Thanks a lot.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that, Jordan. I
No
really, I
worries.
wish I could make presentations as good as that. I thought that was very, very engaging.
that was
And
that was thrown together in minutes, man. It's like
well, I could be so lucky. Well, I have a few questions lined up anyway, but obviously I
yeah.
really want to encourage participants in the chat to put the messages down, and then we can get them to Jordan, because we got them for about another half an hour now, and we want to get as much out of them as possible. So yeah, I thought the first question, I had a couple which you kind of semi-answered during that presentation, but I suppose one which I was thinking the other day was, in the industry, do you ever get tired of video games? I mean, obviously that sounds impossible, but when it becomes your job, I imagine there are times where it's like, oh God, I have to play this game now, and I have to write this about it, and I have to keep up with all these new games coming out, and financially that might not be as viable to others and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to see your take on that.
Like I said earlier, like, I've had to do like crazy guides sometimes and like write articles that I'm not, it is like something that I guess you can, I like video games and I like writing about them, and that's nice. But like sometimes I just don't want to write about video games at all. Like my kind of almost niche, I guess you could say, is like video games and X. So like I've been writing a lot about, the virtual gigs in quarantine, and like, video games and music and video games and fashion and stuff like that for future things. So yeah, you do get tired, and I think that's natural, but that's the beauty of being a freelancer, is that like, it's like I said, it's like writing for every section of your paper. So you can, I could go and pitch an article about science if I wanted to, and write something like completely out of left field. I used to do a lot of writing because I did archaeology. I've discovered this like field of science called archaeogaming, and there was all these like PhD people doing work in it. You can Google that if you want, it's interesting. But I used to do a lot of articles about that. So you can find any niche and talk about it, and it's fun if it's related to the stuff that you like. Yeah, keeps it fresh.
Great stuff. And I've just had a question come in. So you said in freelance, obviously you have email pitches quite often, but have you ever actually had to do any physical interviews, and what were they like? How do you prepare yourself for going on a Zoom like this right now and having to talk to someone and sell yourself in that way?
I've actually never really hopped on a call to discuss a pitch with my editor. I've done like instant messaging and stuff like that. Most of the time it just happens over email or over like Twitter DMs a few times. Like if you're on Twitter, you might say like a call out for pitches, and you just DM the person and be like, what could we, here's the pitch, here's the idea, would you like it? And then you just talk it through there and sort it out there. But I've never really had to interview for a pitch. But I've done job interviews and stuff like that in journalism, and preparing for stuff like that is quite scary. Just have like a good portfolio and be yourself. I know that sounds really cliche, but like just like own it and talk about what you're good at and what you like. Yeah.
I suppose turning that around a bit then, have you ever had to host many interviews with people from the gaming industry? And if so, how do you prepare yourself mentally for being the host of an interview as opposed to being the participant of an interview, if you know what I mean?
Do you mean like in terms of like interviewing a subject?
Like interviewing someone, like how do you prepare yourself mentally for that?
Oh, okay. I mostly freak out for about an hour before it actually happens, and then in the last 5 minutes, like regain my cool. Put on like a nice cooling song or something that like calms us down. I have anxiety, so it's like quite scary to do interviews still, but you kind of push through. And that article where I had to interview Julian Casablancas and his band was like scary as fuck, like honestly. But you just do a lot of it and get used to it. You just throw yourself in the deep end of it, and it kind of comes to you. But I mean, like, it's lots of but you said like, and like a lot of like mannerisms that come out when I'm anxious in an interview. It's really hard. Like, there's no answer for that, to be honest. It's just, if you do more of them, you'll get used to it. Put yourself in that position, and it'll stretch you a bit.
So we've had another question related to interviews here as well. So like you said in your pitch, if your article relies on an interview, so you mentioned that you could do an interview with X, Y, and Z in your pitch. How do you go about sorting things out so that you're not promising someone something which isn't set up yet? Do you preemptively contact people to say, I might need an interview with you if this goes through? Or do you kind of wing it and just hope that they'll say yes?
That's a really good question. sometimes you'll get things offered to you if you're in touch with PR people, which is useful if you're on like PR lists and stuff. People will send you interview opportunities. But yeah, like for example, there's a one I included in this was like interviewed like Porter Robinson for Edge magazine, and I had to like source that interview for myself to prove that I could get it. I think usually the best thing to do is like source the interview prior to the pitch. I mean, sometimes it doesn't go like that, but the best thing to do is just find it. You know, as I said, everybody's emails online. You can find agencies and press people and stuff like that, and email them and just be like, would you be open? Are you doing press right now? Would you be open for an interview with me for X publications? And use the bylines you've already got in a way to prove that you can get those. But you know, if you don't have those, I still think that's something you can still do. You can say, oh, I'm pitching to X, X, and X. You don't have to say that you've already got those bylines. If you just say where you're pitching, then you know they'll probably be interested and be like, and you know, sometimes they're not. I've had like loads of people say, oh, we're not doing press right now, or we don't think it's right for that publication. So yeah, just do it. And the worst thing they can do is say no to you, really.
So I know that because you've done some quite exciting things during your few years of freelance journalism, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you were one of the first people to get to play Cyberpunk before it was officially released. Is that correct? I think I saw it on your Twitter.
Yeah, I've got a jumper in my wardrobe here, which is like bright yellow, and it's like I played, like the PR person sent it was like I played Cyberpunk before release. It's dead cringe, but like yeah.
But I was just gonna ask. I was just gonna ask, like, what's the kind of most surreal moment? Like, because obviously I imagine you've been a fan of video games for quite a while. What was the most surreal moment when you were like, wow, I've officially made it as a games journalist. I'm actually getting invited to talk about this game, and this game I'm a huge fan of has actually contacted me and said, I want you to see this before everyone else does.
I mean, yeah, that does feel amazing. You've got to, you know, stay modest about it and like chill and you know, they those things just come in and it's like, whoa, like cool opportunity. I think probably like the most surreal moment was just like landing in a print magazine. Like I love Edge magazine. I used to read that, so it was really cool to get in there, and like every new byline is awesome. It's like a really nice feeling. Made it in the physical Guardian, and that was like, whoa, like that's something you can show to your actual relatives who don't just like, you know, if I showed them like an article at games, like a game site or something, they'd probably be like, what the fuck's that? But like if I show them the Guardian, they're gonna be like, oh, he's a real journalist. Yeah, and going abroad, like when I've been on trips, that's been amazing. Like I've always wanted to go to Tokyo, and I went there for an interview one time, and that's probably my favorite moment. Definitely, like that was crazy. So yeah.
Great stuff. And I mean, you're talking globally there, but another question I was going to ask is perhaps more local. I just wondered, what are some of the things that you like most about living in Newcastle, living up north? Maybe living up north, maybe something which you think you don't get as much living down south or in London.
I mean, it's cheaper for a start. It's a lot cheaper, and that's the main thing, to be honest. But like, it's a nice, like, I don't know, I enjoy going to London sometimes on like occasions for press trips and events and things like that. They're all in London. Meeting up with my mates as well. It's really lovely to go down and see them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just I'm a bit of an anxious person. It's a really busy place, and I just don't like it because of that. Really, the north is just more friendly. Don't know if that's controversial to say, but that's just how I feel. Yeah.
We've had another question in the chat asking if you have any exercises or activities for coming up with new ideas to pitch, because she says that she's always a bit too slow and she feels like she misses out these relevant stories.
Yeah, it's difficult because, like, I've had like stories that I would deem like crazy ideas that I've worked on for like years to get published, and like I might have thought of it in like 2018 that comes out in 2020. I would say, unrelated to that, if you've got evergreen pitches, like hold on to them and don't let go. Like there's so many publications out there that somebody will pay you to write it. So, but that's not your question. Your question's about like feeling like you're missing out on relevant stories. God, that's hard. For coming up with new ideas to pitch, it's like, I would say read the work of others, read the data, read the facts, immerse yourself in the communities that surround these stories. Like if there's like a Discord or something, or like a group that you can find where people are talking about stuff, and then, or Reddit, like Reddit's a really good one for that. Like look ahead of the curve. You know, like I bet there's some great reporting on like the Wall Street bets community now because of that GameSpot stock stuff. But I bet there's loads of people who are like monitoring that before the fact, and now they've got some really cool ideas to spin out. It's kind of like it's hard because it's been ahead of the curve. I'm sorry if that doesn't answer the question, but you know, it's just a tough one. Yeah.
Well, I suppose that's for the more pressing, like news-related gaming stories. But I also wanted to ask you, because as we've seen during this presentation, you have come up with some quite obscure ideas.
Oh yeah.
Like for example, the PlayStation startup sound relating to Frank Ocean, that kind of thing. It's something which I just can't imagine how someone would think of that idea and get it. Like it just seems so out of the ordinary. And so I was wondering, is that something? Are you personally just someone who's very innovative in that respect, who just thinks of these very interesting, fresh ideas, or is there an art to honing that craft and trying to think of these really obscure, unique ideas?
I think that would be giving me a lot of credit, but I think really, like I just like sometimes I'm just sitting there and I'll just think of something really dumb. Like for example, that piece where it was like how to survive as a freelance writer in The Sims. Like I saw that The Sims was adding like a freelancer career, and I was just like, what if I played it as me and saw what happened and recorded that? So like, just I think I tried to say this before, but just like listen to the kind of the dumb ideas in your head, and that, you know, I can show proof, I guess, that some of them have landed. But I think, you know, journalism is perceived as quite a stuffy business. I tried to illustrate that before. There's a lot of stuffiness that surrounds it. But, you know, fun, silly, great ideas can lead you to the most interesting stories. That Frank Ocean one was like a piece I did for Unwinnable, where I talked about how loads of modern artists have, like Drake and, you know, Frank Ocean and stuff, have sampled video game startup sounds and music from video games, and talking about like where their inspiration comes from, and my love of like Frank Ocean's music and video games brought me to that. So yeah, listen to your dumbest ideas, I think.
We've had another question in the chat. I would just say as well, if people want to keep on messaging in the chat, keep the questions coming, because I've only got a couple left. But we've been asked a question. Do you think it's important to have multimedia skills?
Multimedia skills in what sense? Like
I imagine
editing,
that's meaning perhaps like video editing, broadcast journalism, print journalism, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because like, you know, you know, when I started freelancing, I didn't have any qualifications in writing or anything. Like I decided when I was already set up as a freelancer is when I was like, okay, I'll do a master's in media. The main thing I learned was like media law, so I wasn't like slandering or libeling and doing anything like that. I would say a little bit of media law can go a long way. Definitely look that up. But, you know, you can go into free resources online. You don't have to take a course like me. My master's was just useful because it was like a way to set myself up as freelance and do something on the side and get an actual qualification in journalism, which has been useful. But I also learned on my master's documentary filmmaking, and like video editing and all that kind of stuff, and that's been handy. I've really enjoyed that kind of element, even though I would love to do more of it. I don't think it's essential to have multimedia skills, but it can be really handy, like photoshopping a cool image for your article, or, you know, somebody might give you an assignment to edit a video or I've had to pull scripts together into videos from my work. You know, if you're a student, definitely look into those sort of things and try and brush up on it. I think it can be handy, but it's not essential. I'm a child of the internet. I've been doing all that kind of stuff. You know, I had like a weird YouTube channel when I was like 12. So like I learned how to do some of these things just randomly, but you know, it's not essential, but it's good to look into, certainly. And definitely media law. That's a good one.
Fantastic. We've had another question in the chat. So someone's asked, would you recommend doing a master's to set yourself up for journalism? And I would just quickly say as well, if people want to unmute themselves, they're more than welcome to just put that in the message, just put in little brackets, unmute me, whatever, and then you can speak to Jordan yourself. But if Jordan, just go ahead.
Feel free to unmute everybody and speak to us. Like, I'm not like the, the question, sorry. Would you recommend doing a master's to set up yourself for journalism? It's tricky because like I'd got the advice from the career service and was like, okay, I'm going to try being a freelancer because I got a few hits. I got a few pitches accepted when I was in my third year of uni. And I was like, okay, should I do this? Is this crazy? And then like doing the master's for me was more of I love doing my master's. It was fun, but it was the fact that I did like there wasn't much contact time, and that meant I had a lot of time to set up my stall, and I was writing news for IGN, pitching, doing loads of freelance stuff in between my assignments, which was super handy. But I don't think it's essential at all. You don't need any qualifications to be a freelance journalist. When I started, I didn't even have a degree in archaeology. I just had my A levels and GCSEs and a bit of gumption to just be like, oh, okay, let's pitch these sites, and it worked. So I would say it depends on your situation. It's not essential. And, if you think that it's just going to be like debt over your head, maybe not. But the main thing I learned was media law. That was really handy. But yeah, that's a hard one. Sorry. I hope that's helped.
We've been asked another question relating to your interviews, but it's a bit more of a relaxed one. Just asking, what's the coolest interview you ever done? I mean, I remember seeing that you've been to Japan before, haven't you, to work
that
with
was cool.
in the industry before? Yeah.
Yeah. I've done some interesting interviews. That Julian Casablancas one was pretty mad. Like, I was like, why am I speaking to this guy about video games? But the coolest interview, God, that's a tough one. Artists that I admire their music, and like Porter Robbins, people like that. What else? Like video game developers that I've always looked up to. Like, I recently interviewed a guy called Tetsuya Nomura about Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy, and asked him a bunch of like really nerdy questions, and it was so much fun. But yeah, it's just been surreal. It's been mad to speak to these people. But eventually I just get over the hurdle of being like, I'm speaking to this person. Like, but you never get over that really. I'm like I said before, I'm still freaking out until like 2 minutes before the thing ends, before the thing starts. So yeah.
Sorry, I just had to point out, is that a chicken nugget pillow you have behind you on your bed?
Yeah, it is. I was going to bring that up at the start. I kept it in frame because the whole point of this talk is to just kind of, I'm just winging it. I'm not a professional. I've got my own kempt hair that I haven't cut in like months, and there's my chicken nugget body pillow on my bed. Yeah. So there you go. That's what it is. Yeah, if that's what people are asking.
Very nice. So yeah, just got a couple more questions. Again, feel free to pop anything in the chat. How do you remain positive in the world of freelance journalism when pitches may get declined or just completely ignored?
Yeah, that's really tough. I think it's very, very hard to get over rejection. But you kind of have to learn to embrace it. I found one of the super useful things to do is to talk about your rejections. Everybody on Twitter just talks about their wins and oh, I got a pitch accepted here. Here's my cool article with Tetsuya Nomura or something like that. You need to embrace your failures as well and speak about them. And I think I used to do that with a group of friends, and that was super handy. Like, we used to be like, oh, didn't get this accepted today, and we'd be like, oh, where do you want to send that to then? Do you want to send that to somewhere else? Like, how can we, like, where next? Don't ever let it die, in the sense that you can always find another publication that might want it. It's tough, really tough to get used to criticism at first and rejection, but again, it's a learning process, and you'll eventually get over it. Now when I get things rejected, I'm just kind of like, okay, on to the next one. Like, it kind of goes through us, but that's like, I've had to put up like a really thick skin and deal with that. There's been a few ideas where, and that's what I think, I'm just like stubborn with some of my ideas. Like, I've had ideas where like they've been rejected by like everywhere, but I've been like, I'm gonna get this to a site, and I've worked on them for years to get them into places. But yeah,
great stuff. And then moving on to my final question, just to close off the presentation, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received in your career that you think you could bestow upon the people in the audience?
Oh, I would say it's probably one of those ones I included in the article.
I think I took note, was the one which was like, you don't lose anything by sending a pitch or something like that. I think that stuck out to me.
Let them say no to you was a big one. That was like, okay. Yeah. But I think the biggest one is definitely like, they don't care about who you are. They just care about the strength of your idea. Like, who the hell was I when I was pitching some of these sites? But like, sometimes the editor will see a nugget of truth in your idea and give that a shot, and that can be really liberating and useful and wake you up to the idea that you could have like a Pulitzer winning journalist pitching a site, and then you pitch them you pitch them and you've only got like your student bylines and stuff, and they might accept you because your idea's more interesting or your idea's got legs. So it ties into the idea of like listening to your dumbest, craziest ideas and just pitching them. And if they say no to you, no big deal. Just a no.
Fantastic. I think that's some great advice. Well, thank you very much, Jordan, for joining us this afternoon. I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone when saying that we've all really enjoyed that talk. And I assume that your Twitter is completely open for anyone if they have any further questions, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Just DM me if you want, and you can have a copy of it if you like. Just ask me any questions, and I love doing these kind of things. So it's passing on the knowledge I didn't know. So I hope it helped, and thanks for having us.
Amazing. And that Twitter is at Jordan Oloman. Is it just?
Yeah. My name's a bit of a strange one, but just you'll find it.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. I hope you had a lovely day, Jordan. See you later.
Yeah. Everybody else have a lovely day. Goodbye.